So here we go with the famous Metta Sutta, one of the most beloved suttas of the Buddha. So here we go. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be happy, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to false views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And over to you, Ajahn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very good. Nice to see you all again. Haven't been here for a while. It was always nice to meet everyone. Hello. I'm going to start, as usual, by talking a little bit about meditation practice. Then we do some meditation, and then we get into a talk and some Q&A afterwards, the kind of usual routine that we have. And with meditation, it is interesting how there's always more to kind of learn, more to grapple with. There's always the sense that our meditation perhaps could get better. It's very rare to find someone whose meditation is too good. This kind of doesn't really happen. So there's always kind of a movement towards things. And there's always this feeling that we need to remove more obstacles, more problems that get in our way. And so one of the big questions is always, how can we enable this path even more? And there's really two things that meditation is about, or two kind of complementary aspects that we need to develop for meditation to work. And one of those aspects is to give up the world, relinquish the world a little bit. The more interest we have in the world, the more things are happening in our life and all of these kind of things, the more we hold on to that, and the more difficult it is to become peaceful once we do meditation practice. If there are all these important things going on in the world, that is where our mind will go. We will think about our work, we'll think about our family, we'll think about problems that we need to get resolved, we'll think about the meal we're going to have after the meditation, I don't know what, because these things are really important to us. And so that is one aspect of the idea of meditation, to actually let go a little bit. And through that, it actually enables you to find some peace, because the outgoingness of the mind, going into the world, is basically the root problem in all meditation practice. But there's another, I think, very interesting aspect of meditation that actually the Buddha talks about in a number of places in the suttas. And that is the aspect of giving rise to joy in the meditation practice. And one of the kind of remarkable things about the Buddhist path, and one of the things that makes this whole Buddhist teaching so extraordinarily attractive, is that it is all about happiness in one way or another. It is basically about what everyone in the world wants: happiness and meaning, purpose and happiness. And so in meditation practice, ideally, we want to give rise to some of that joy, some of that gladness that actually is foundational for the entire Buddhist path. And one is you have that little bit of joy in your meditation, and this may happen only rarely to you, occasionally, maybe it happens more regularly. It is very individual depending on the person. But once you have that, meditation really starts to be fun, and it starts to be easy to focus on the meditation object as a consequence. So how can we give rise to this joy? This is one of the critical things. And very often what we have to do is we have to kind of lean the mind in a certain direction. And we have talked about this here before in many places, the idea of leaning it towards how you are living your life. And if you do live a very pure life, and many of you do, I know many of you quite well, and I know you already live very pure lives, and big sadhu for that, that's wonderful. Then there is a chance you are able to tap into some of that good feeling, because you will tend to feel good about yourself if you live well. If you don't feel good enough about yourself already, ask yourself how you can improve your conduct even more. How can you have even more compassion in your interactions with people, etc., etc. But I didn't really want to talk about that. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is one of the other ways of giving rise to joy that the Buddha recommends. And this is called the Buddha Nusati, the recollection of the Buddha himself. And this is sometimes, I think, underestimated, the power of these kind of recollections. I know if you have grown up in a Buddhist country, and some of you have presumably done that, and then these kind of things may be more natural or more easy because you have kind of grown up with a relationship to the Buddha himself. But people who are grown up in non-Buddhist countries, like here in Australia or some of those other countries where you come from, it can be more difficult to really get a feeling for the Buddha. Buddha can seem a bit alien, a bit far away, distant both in time and culture, far away from our modern societies. And so we actually need to work a little bit with the idea of the Buddha to make him come alive, to be a real teacher to us, someone who actually is impacting on our life directly, even though he lived at a very different age and a very different society from ours. And once you start to get a feeling for the Buddha, that is where things really start to open up in very interesting ways. So I'll give you a couple of ideas of how to get a connection to the Buddha. And I do talk about these things quite regularly when I teach meditation retreats. But one of the ways of getting a contact with the Buddha is to remember that when he taught this Dhamma of his 2,500 years ago, he had people like us in mind when he gave these teachings. The Buddha didn't just teach the audience in front of him. It wasn't just the monks and the nuns and the lay people who were present at the time who had the benefit of his teachings. The Buddha knew that this Dhamma was going to keep rolling on in the world. That's why we have the sutta called the Dhamma Chakka Pavatana Sutta, the setting in motion, the wheel of the Dhamma. He knew that this was going to roll on in the world from one age to another age, from century to century, millennium to millennium, from country to country, culture to culture, across all these boundaries that we impose on ourselves in this world. And because he knew that already at that time, the way that he gives his message is very universal. He speaks to the universal aspects of the human mind. For that matter, even the non-human mind, if you wish, right? The devas, whatever else you might have. So he speaks to universal aspects of the human mind. And he knows that there will be people listening to these teachings in the future. He may be looking at the crowd in front of him, but at the back of his mind is going to be people like us here today, trying to understand these teachings. We also are direct disciples of the Buddha, because the Buddha actually speaks to us also when he gives his suttas. So when you start thinking like this, and when you start reading the suttas, and when you read a little sutta, maybe a small little verse, maybe just by listening to a talk of someone elucidating the suttas, remember that when you do that, you are actually being taught much more directly by the Buddha than you ever thought was possible. The Buddha actually is thinking of each one of us, not as persons, but as potential people in the future. So the Buddha actually is your teacher at that point, because he knows that there will be people like you listening to the Dhamma, and me, for that matter, listening to these teachings sometime in the future. And when you read the suttas like that, and you know the Buddha is talking to you, it creates a very powerful connection. It makes you read the word of the suttas in an entirely new way. You read them with a sense of reverence. The Buddha is talking to me, for goodness sake. I better listen. This is the greatest spiritual teacher in human history. This is someone extraordinary. Okay, let me listen. He's teaching me. And you start shaking a little bit because you feel, you get so excited by the Buddha teaching you. You know what I mean? And that is the right attitude. We should be a bit excited. We should shake a little bit, because that shows us that we have our emotions engaged in what is going on. And when we are emotionally engaged with the suttas like that, that is where things start to happen. That is where joy becomes possible. That is where a connection to something very large and truly awesome actually starts to come together. So this is kind of the idea here, creating this sense of reverence, of something very high and beautiful and spiritual coming directly to you over this gap of 2,500 years from a different culture. So this is one way that I like to read the suttas and listen to the word of the Buddha, because I find it so much more powerful if I remember where this is coming from. But another thing that I also like to do, I like the idea of remembering who the Buddha really is, what kind of being the Buddha is. And one of the most important things about the Buddha is that he was a human being just like us. If you were to meet the Buddha today, you would see him like he would look like a man. He would look like an Indian man, basically. That's what he would look like. And so you would meet him and you would be able to interact with him. You were able to talk to him. He's not something kind of extraordinary apart from his inner mental space, but in external things, he's just like each one of us. So the Buddha is this Indian man. But then when you start to listen to the Buddha, when you start to listen to his words, when you come to visit him, you realize actually there's something extraordinary about this person. Here is someone who has a message for us, a message that has to do with real happiness, with overcoming all suffering in our life, with finding the highest kind of contentment, with finding the meaning of life itself. That is what his teachings really are about. Someone showing you the meaning of life. And when you start to understand what this really is about, you start to understand that actually the Buddha is the one who gives you the highest gift that anyone in this world can ever give another human being. How do you feel if someone gives you a gift? Someone comes with kindness, they give you some flowers or a box of chocolate or whatever it might be. well, you feel happy, yeah? Or maybe if you have a bad day, you don't feel happy. But if you have a good day, you feel really happy. Wow, thank you so much. But a box of chocolate is nothing, right? Who cares about a box of chocolate? I mean, it's nice, and we should certainly rejoice, and we should certainly have gratitude. But the happiness is so ephemeral and so short, so lasts for such a short time. Buddha gives us access to the gift of the highest happiness that is possible for a human being to attain. And he does it purely out of service, purely out of compassion. Remember, the Buddha would rather sit at the root of a tree and just meditate. That is when he is at his most happy. But he actually goes out of his way to share these teachings with us, even though it is detrimental to him personally. So when you start to understand what is going on, there's something very powerful going on here. The Buddha is giving you the highest gift that is possible in this world. What do you want to do then? At least that's how I feel. I just want to bow down to that Buddha. I just want to prostrate myself and just say thank you. And as you do that, you kind of bow down to the Buddha. You start to understand what the Buddha is really about. That is when you kind of maybe tear up, because the joy and the happiness that comes from this powerful interaction can be so strong. And if you are able to experience some of that joy just by bowing down to the Buddha in this way, then that is when you are doing the real Buddha-nusati, the recollection of the Buddha. It's because a very beautiful and powerful experience. If you find it hard to bow down to the Buddha, maybe you don't feel you have any connection to the Buddha, take someone else in this world, someone you can relate to. I don't know, Ajahn Brahmali or some other kind of teacher in the world, whoever it is, someone you feel you have a connection to. And then think of yourself as bowing down to this teacher. I don't know, but I enjoy bowing down to Ajahn Brahmali. For me, that's a very purifying thing, because I know that when I bow down to Ajahn Brahmali, it feels good. There's something very beautiful even with someone like Ajahn Brahmali, very powerful. But then when I bow down to the Buddha, it's like I imagine Ajahn Brahmali multiplied by a lot. So Ajahn Brahmali multiplied by a lot. And that is really kind of, for me, the way I make sense of the Buddha in a way. Similar kind of qualities, peace, gentleness, kindness, compassion, understanding, no ego, no self. It's painful to bow down to an ego, but it's very easy to bow down when there is no self and there is no ego behind it. And this is what you find with the Buddha. So my suggestion to you is, and this you may find this very difficult, but if you want to, and if you feel that your mind inclines a little bit in this way, some people are more devotional in nature. So give it a shot, because we need to use all the tools at our disposal to be able to give rise to these qualities that we're trying to achieve on the path of meditation. All right, so that is just a little bit of introduction for you all. So let's do a little bit of meditation together here. Okay, everyone, so just as always, as we start out, make sure you find that beautiful middle way where the kind of body disappears, and to enable you to make the body disappear, you have to be at ease. In fact, one of the words in the suttas for meditation is precisely being at ease, being comfortable, pasu viharati. So be at ease, find that relaxation, don't have any pains or problems, make sure you are nice and relaxed, no tensions, leave all the tensions of the day gradually behind, not by forcing them out, but by being patient and allowing things to dissipate. And just keep on relaxing, keep on just allowing the world to flow by. Remember, the way to relax is actually just to be aware, just being aware without pushing and pulling, being aware without reacting to the world. There's nothing right or wrong in this world. There's just things happening. So just allow them to pass through you, going in and then going out. No reaction in between. And as you do that, as you live in a non-reactive way, you automatically become peaceful. It is the reactions that create the lack of peace. No reaction is beautiful, peaceful, and tranquil. And now, if you wish, see if you can imagine the idea of meeting the Buddha himself. Imagine someone in a forest somewhere, sitting at the root of a tree. And very gently you approach this person. And as you approach, you feel this field around this person of compassion, kindness and tranquility. And as you approach, you feel more and more at ease. And then you start to reflect on this person. And you start to understand that this person called the Buddha has given you so much happiness. From the very first stages on the path, when you started walking, learning about the idea of generosity and morality and kindness. Very gently, the Buddha guides you gradually, stage by stage, through the stages of meditation, all the various aspects of how to live well in this life. And every stage, the Buddha is there to support you. And you start to understand that so much of the meaning and happiness in your life comes from this person. In fact, all the main meaning and happiness that you have comes precisely from here. The spiritual practice, these things that make life truly meaningful. And you realize there's also much more to come in the future. The gift that this gift person is giving you is clearly the highest gift any person can give anyone else in this world. And as you remember this, as you approach the Buddha, all you want to do is to bow down to express your gratitude. So you bow down very gently, very slowly, and you don't really want to get up because it feels so powerful to be able to bow down to someone with such remarkable qualities. It feels so good. You get up again and you bow once more. You get up and you bow for a third time, reflecting on the meaning of the Buddha. So try to make the Buddha your teacher in this way, and see what it does to you on the emotional level, and then bring those emotions with you into your practice. Okay, everyone, so coming towards the end of the meditation. Before we come to the end, just take a few moments just to evaluate what has happened. And if you do feel a bit more at ease, a bit more peaceful, a bit more mindful, a bit more gentle, if you feel that some positive qualities have arisen, ask yourself why that is the case. Okay, everyone, so that's the meditation for tonight. Are there any questions about meditation practice in general, or about what we did tonight or anything? And this is your chance to ask anything in this area, so please fire away. Everyone supremely happy? No one even slightly discontent when asked about anything? No? Okay. All right. So the chance has passed. Okay. Anyway. So let's just start. Shall I start, Chris? Is that all right?
Yes, that would be fine,
yeah?
John.
Great. Yeah. Great.
There are two hands up in the
Please.
reaction.
Please, okay. Good.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Gloria, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is that I often don't feel safe. And just the meditation I just did, and I imagine I sit with the Buddha, I feel like I feel safe and I feel protected. Is it a good thing to do, like from now on that I do the meditation and I imagine myself to sit with the Buddha? Thank you.
I think it's a very good thing to do, and I think it is not just imaginary, because it sounds like it is an imaginary kind of protection, but actually it is real. It's a real protection, because if you have a degree of faith in the Buddha and confidence in the Buddha, even if something was going to happen, let's say you were going to die. That's kind of the worst thing that can happen usually. Let's say you were going to die, but if you have that confidence in the Buddha at that time, you're going to have a pure heart. And if you have a pure heart and you have a good quality inside, whatever happens is going to be positive in the future. So it is. I think it's a very good thing to do, and I think precisely the spiritual path leads to so many good things. And one of the things is a sense of safety, a sense of independence, a sense that what happens in the world is not so important anymore because you have a real safety inside. So absolutely, indeed, yeah.
Thank you.
Christelle, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Ajahn Brahmali, for all your teachings. Really, really, really thank you.
Okay.
And also thank you because thanks to you, we started with my sisters to do the Metta meditation of Bande Sujato.
Okay.
So that's very good for us. And I noticed last time I did a Metta meditation, I started to feel in my heart it was getting kind of hot feeling, and like if there was a lot of blood, or I don't know, a bit unusual feeling. And I started to worry a little bit that, I don't know, am I going to have a heart attack or is that normal? So I wanted to have your advice on that. Thank you.
Okay. I think the most important thing is really where your mind is at. Is your mind reasonably peaceful? Is your mind in a good state? Do you feel a sense of joy or whatever? As long as your mind is in a good state, your body will usually be okay. A lot of things can happen in the body during meditation practice. All kinds of feelings, all kinds of things can start to happen. But usually, if the mind is okay, then the body will be fine. And the changes in the body are just a consequence of, we're doing things that we don't normally do. And because of that, the body will have certain reactions. But if the mind starts to go not so peaceful, or you become anxious about something, or you become deluded, or you become maybe even angry or something like that in your meditation, then of course, then it's a problem. And that is where you have to stop. And then you may also have bodily reactions. And in those cases, actually, it is much more of a concern. So I would say that don't worry too much unless it feels really bad. I mean, if it starts to feel really dodgy, of course, you have to stop. But if it is just, something that is not too concerning, then focus on the mind instead, and the mind is okay, you'll probably be fine. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got another question. Can I ask?
Yeah, please. Yeah, I'm sure.
Nobody else is asking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Something else that happened in my meditation last time, I was getting more peaceful and enjoying it more, and then I had in my head a desire to shout or to scream, which is not my usual behavior, but it was like in my head something wanted to shout, but I was quite meditating, so that was quite surprising for me. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. That's interesting, yeah. I don't know, maybe there was a sense that you needed some kind of release or something. Maybe there's some kind of something built up inside, some kind of tension, and you just wanted to release it, something deep inside which needed to come out. I don't know. And that could be that feeling. And once you become a little bit calm and a little bit at ease, then some of those deeper things inside may start to kind of come to the surface. And then maybe screaming is the kind of the thing that you would want to do. I think I read somewhere that people were into kind of screaming therapy. Yeah? They would go into the forest somewhere and they would just scream at the top of their lungs because they kind of released something in them. And so maybe you would kind of tapping into that scream therapy in a deep kind of way. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. So, but wait till you go into the forest, or don't scream at the right place, right? Not at the wrong time, etc. Otherwise, you're going to scare other people as well. So yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think it's a problem actually. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes, you're most welcome to ask questions. Type them in the chat or unmute and ask them directly.
There's a couple of things in the chat. Is that anything I need to look at, Chris? Or
No, the chat is fine.
Yeah.
Ajahn.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Oh, this is Martha. I had an inclination to hug when I saw him in the forest. Is that respectful or inappropriate? It probably is. I'm a hugger.
Okay. Yeah, that's very. Yeah.
I just want to know if that's disrespectful.
It's quite nice. Yeah, I know what I can relate to that myself. Sometimes it's nice. A good hug can be really great. But I think with the Buddha, if you really met the Buddha, you probably wouldn't want to hug him. I think you would feel so much respect if you met that kind of person that you probably just want to bow down instead, actually. Because I think there's a bit too much familiarity with hugging. It's like it's a little bit like you're on the same level in a sense. And you may love the person, it may be very dear to you. But I think here the respect would be so great that you wouldn't really want to go into that kind of close physical proximity. So I would probably not recommend hugging the Buddha. I probably would keep a bit more distance. But I can relate to what you're saying. So it's not So yeah, good.
Thank you. It just makes me feel safe.
Great. All right. Okay, so I'll give a little bit of a talk. Let's talk about a few things, and then we can, towards the very end, we can have a bit more Q&A if you wish.
Sounds excellent, Ajahn.
Sadhu, thank you, Chris. So one of the things that I have kind of been doing recently in the monastery, and every day we have all the lay people coming to the monastery. They bring food into the monastery. It's one of the most very touching things when you stay in the forest, and all this food kind of comes into the monastery and everyone feeds you. It's kind of one of those beautiful Buddhist things that have been happening for 2,500 years. And it's like, from the point of view of the monastics, it's just wonderful to see this kindness and generosity coming into the monastery. And the lay people enjoy feeding the monks. Yeah? So it's kind of good for everyone. So it's kind of a very, very nice thing to do. And so when they come, then usually they come upstairs, and then we have a little bit of a chat before the meal, yeah? And sometimes I like to have a bit of fun when we do this kind of chatting, because I believe in the idea of being light-hearted or being playful. I think this is a very important part of the Buddhist path, because when we are light-hearted, when we are playful, then life is far more enjoyable. We don't take ourselves so seriously. The ego is reduced a little bit. There's a lot of benefits from just being playful and being a bit more childlike and these kind of things. So I ask the people usually, how are you? And then the kind of typical answer in Australia, at least, is I'm good. Yeah, that's kind of what everyone says. So I look around the audience and I say, oh, well, how are you over there? And everyone says they are good. And so I say, is anyone here who is not good? And then they start looking at me. What am I talking about? And I've been doing this for quite a while now. So just the other day, I was asking everyone, I was saying, well, how are you? And nobody dared to open their mouth, because I knew they were going to play games with them, right? So they were kind of everyone was quiet when I said, how are you? And that was kind of fascinating, kind of interesting. Yeah. But the idea of asking, how are you, was kind of, the idea for me was, well, let's look at this question a bit more deeply here, because what does it actually mean? And one of the things that I always like to have as a starting point when I ask these kind of questions is, well, let's take the Buddha as our standard. So if you were to meet the Buddha in the forest and you were to ask the Buddha, how are you? What would he say? Would he say, oh, it's all this terrible, it's all this suffering? Would he say that? Or would he say, oh, it's so wonderful, I'm enlightened, everything is really cool? Or would he say something completely different? What would actually the Buddha answer? And I think that what the Buddha would say, and this kind of comes out in the suttas very well, he actually would say something like, oh, I'm well, thank you. Yeah, everything is good, no problems. How have you slept? There's one place in the suttas where the Buddha is asked, did you sleep well? And the Buddha gives this beautiful verse, yes, I slept very well, because those people who are calm and peaceful, who have stilled all the defilements of the mind, they always sleep well. So the main thing about the Buddha is that he is polite. He follows the ordinary social code that we're supposed to live up to make social interactions easy, that kind of lubricate our social interactions so that we kind of function naturally. So this is the first thing I like about the Buddha, is that he acts like a normal human being. He doesn't say something which is completely out of the blue. Well, sometimes he does, but not in these kind of situations. Yeah, and so it's a kind of ordinary thing here. Of course, if you know the Buddha more deeply, and if you have a long conversation with the Buddha, he might say something else. Yeah, he might say something really profound and something very interesting. And he might say something like, how are you? He might say, suffering arising, suffering passing away. This is one of those very Buddhist answers. Yeah, what is life like? Well, life actually is suffering arising, suffering passing away. It's a very profound expression of the Dhamma, and it's something that really can only be understood when you have the full right view and the full right understanding of the Buddhist path. So that's something for you to contemplate, yeah? Suffering arising, suffering passing away. I'm not going to go into that any more deeply because it becomes a bit of a sidetrack and it's very profound anyway. But it's a very interesting answer nonetheless. So that is how the Buddha might answer this question. Well, what about us who are not Buddhas? What about anyone who is not an arahant or a stream enterer or has that full insight into the Buddhist teachings? What should we say? Well, we should also, of course, act normally. We shouldn't become some kind of crazy Buddhist who says completely wild things. So it's good to say, yeah, I'm fine, or, I'm good, or whatever. That's perfectly okay, just to have that natural, social interaction. But sometimes it is also, again, interesting to ask the question, well, what does this actually mean? What is the true answer to this question? And one way of answering this is to say, good, bad, who knows? Yeah, this is the famous simile of Ajahn Brahmali. Good, bad, who knows? When anything happens to us in our life, is it good? Is it bad? Actually, often we have no idea whether things are good or bad. If you ask me now, I ask you, are you good? How are you? Actually, good, bad, who knows is not a bad answer at all. Because how do we measure our own well-being? Well, we measure our well-being compared to how you were an hour ago, how you were yesterday, right? It's kind of relative to all of these other things. And those things are relative to other things. And there is no standard by which we can decide whether we are good or not. You might say that you are good today, and then tomorrow you're even better, and so suddenly today looks like suffering in comparison. So what is it? Is it suffering? Or is it good? So it's kind of meaningless. Yeah, we can't really say whether we are good or bad because there is no standard by which we can measure whether things actually are good or bad. So good, bad, who knows is a good initial answer to that particular question here. But there is another answer which I think is even more interesting, and it kind of gets to the very heart of what this whole path is about. And if you practice well, if you find that the spiritual life actually is changing you, that you are becoming gradually more happy and reducing suffering, then the best answer we can give to that question is that I'm getting better or getting more happy. Yeah, that is really the kind of ideal answer, because if that is happening, then you are actually heading in a certain direction. You're heading in the direction that the Buddha wanted us to go, which actually is to improve, getting better, having more happiness, having less suffering. And then you know that if you keep on going in that direction, up, towards something very positive, then eventually you will have to reach a goal that is very profound and very interesting as a consequence. Eventually Nibbana will be yours. Eventually powerful happinesses will be yours because you're heading in that direction. You're always moving in that direction. So this should be our ideal as Buddhists, that we're always moving to more and more wholesome qualities, less and less unwholesome qualities. And if you find that there is a general trend in your life that you are getting better, that you're becoming more kind, more compassionate, more peaceful, more wise, more mindful, better meditation, less ill will, less desires, less confusion, less fear, then you are on the right track as a general trend in your life. So how can we do this? This is kind of the critical thing. And of course, this is what the entire Buddhist path is about. But I want to talk about one particular thing today which can help us in this practice of moving in the right direction. One of the things that you find in the suttas of the Buddha, which is very, to my mind, perhaps often overlooked a little bit, is what is called the development of perception. Perception is how we look at the world, is how we relate to the world around us. Yeah? Perception is about making sense of the world around us. Is this an enemy? Is it a friend? Is this a room, or is this what is going on around me? All of these things are perceptions that we see, that we hear, how we make sense of the world around us. So the Buddha says in certain places that the person who ends up becoming enlightened compared to the person who does not end up becoming enlightened, the difference is that the person who moves in the right direction, moving towards awakening, is a person who understands which perceptions lead to decline, which perceptions lead to stability, which perceptions lead to improvement, and which perceptions lead to a penetration of the truth, insight into the truth. The person who understands that is the person who's going to make real progress towards awakening on this path. And then the Buddha gives a large number of different perceptions that we can use to develop our perception in the right way so as to improve on the path. Now, one of these perceptions, and it's not really talked about as such in the suttas, but obviously it is a perception, is the idea of rebirth. Now, many of you probably have an idea of rebirth already, and if you have doubts, then that's fine as well, but you probably already have an idea of rebirth. Now, in Buddhism, we tend to pass these things by very quickly. We ask people, well, have you got right view? Do you believe in rebirth and karma? Yes, I do. Okay, fine, you got right view. But actually, it is not as simple as that, because the idea of right view is a gradual movement towards appreciating these truths. Understanding what rebirth and karma really is actually is a gradual change in your outlook, becoming closer and closer to what this truth actually really means. Making it real in your life, having a feeling, like a visceral experience that these things are real, carrying it with you at all times, and then using this as a power in your meditation practice. So we need to reflect on these things. We need to ask ourselves what they actually mean. And as we do that, that is when they become powerful in our life. And the idea of rebirth is one of these things. The more idea you have of rebirth, this is what it says in the suttas essentially, the more motivation you will have to practice the Buddhist path, including kindness at the very beginning, the sila, including the meditation practice, including all of these aspects of the Buddhist path. So, how can we do this? Now, one of the things that I have found with the Buddhist suttas, and this is also about the rebirth and karma, is that sometimes it can be a bit theoretical. It can be a bit kind of removed. It's not like immediate experience. It's not like a story which can touch us in a much deeper way, but it can perhaps be a little bit theoretical. And so when you read about rebirth, yes, it kind of makes sense, but it may not touch you so much on the emotional level. Now, it is very important that these things should touch us emotionally, because if it touches you emotionally, that is where the power comes from. That is where the real motivation comes from. We are driven by feelings. We are driven by emotions. We're not really driven by ideas. Ideas are like cold very often. If it is a good idea, it might have an emotional impact, but often they have no emotional impact, and then they are kind of a bit dead for us in a sense. It is emotions that really drive us. So we should search to find a way to make ideas like rebirth emotional for us, and then it kind of starts to have an impact. And one of the ladies who happened to be staying with us here, I asked her to have a kind of teaching session with the monks. We had kind of a discussion group where she was giving most of the teachings. Very interesting lady who had some very interesting experience and things. And she told this story about in her own life, which kind of gives this feeling of rebirth, why it really matters in a sense. This is not really about rebirth as such, but it's kind of approaching this area. And she said that when she was of a certain age, 40 or whatever it was, she had some kind of extreme allergic reaction to all the environment around her. And it got so bad that she had a seizure. And in this seizure, her body was completely out of control. So she was thrown out of her bed many meters because the body was reacting in weird kind of ways. And her whole body froze. She wasn't able to breathe anymore. Nothing really functioned. And at this point, lying on the floor, not being able to breathe, not being able to do anything, she thought she was going to die. It was a fascinating story. She thought she was going to die. And as she was lying on the floor, thinking that she was going to die, she realized, actually, what about all my family members? I got parents still. I think she had a husband at that time still. And she realized, actually, I can't really die. And then she felt inside of herself, and what she felt at that time was the remorse and regret for the few bad things that she had done in her life. And she knew, I cannot die with this kind of regret. Dying with regret, dying with remorse is a very painful thing. And it's obvious it's going to lead to something bad in the future. And then, as she had these experiences, she started to realize, okay, I've got to live. So she started to use all her willpower, or all that was available to her, to gradually start to breathe again. And gradually, after about half an hour or so, she was able to breathe properly and come back to life again. And she said that after that experience, and she called it a near-death experience, it's almost like you are heading towards the other side. After that, it's like the idea of sila, the idea of virtue, the idea of morality, of kindness is always at the back of her mind. So it's almost like this, she is not able anymore to do anything bad because of that one experience. That is the power of a near-death experience. That's the power of being kind of on death's door when it happens to the right kind of person. But of course it goes beyond that, because the idea of rebirth is much more than just coming close to rebirth. And one of the very powerful things for me has been to read some of the books, real stories of people who have a near-death experience. They leave the body, and they kind of go somewhere. They might meet people who have passed away a long time ago, and they have all these extraordinary stories about what actually happens to people after they are basically dead. Very, very interesting stories. And I have found myself that to read these stories of people is a very powerful complement to what you find in the suttas. Because in the suttas it's a little bit dry, but this is very real. So when you get the theoretical framework of rebirth together with these very personal stories of what actually happened to people, it is actually quite, to me it was very powerful. And the stories for me were much more emotionally powerful than reading it in the suttas. And so what these stories were saying was basically that, once you've had this experience, once you have seen something more, you have a very powerful sense that there is more life after you pass away. You can see the connections because you have maybe a life review. You can see the connections between how you live and the results in the future. It leaves this indelible mark on your mind. And then when you come back afterwards, again, your entire life is changed. And you want to live in a new way. You want to live with kindness. You want to live with care, because you understand that there's something much more in this world. This little world that we are trapped in here and now is like nothing. It's just kind of, why do we cling on to these material things? Why do we cling on to this status or whatever it is that we have in this life? Why do we make these things so important when there's this much bigger point of view? Kindness is what matters. Care, compassion, understanding, these are the things that actually matter in life. And this is the feeling that these people came back with after the near-death experience. And this is the power of the idea of rebirth. Getting that larger picture, understanding things in proportion, in comparison to each other, and then it starts to change your view. But what was interesting to me is that it is not just having the experience that is life-changing. Even reading about it is very powerful. The fact that I could read these stories, it actually had an impact on me. And it was very interesting. When I was reading this book, I was on my way to Bali. I was flying from Sydney to Bali. It's only a few weeks ago. I was going to some kind of talk or something. And then I got to Bali airport, to the immigration, right? And the immigration at the airport was a big nightmare. Because of COVID, there was all these queues, and I asked people, how long have you been queuing? I've been queuing for 2 hours, I've been queuing for 3 hours or whatever. Everyone looking really grim, everyone with their phone or whatever, no one talking to anyone. There was hundreds of people there. And I had just read this book about remembering the big picture. And so I looked around, I thought, wow, this is a pretty grim scene. No one talking to anyone. So I decided, okay, I'm going to talk to the people around me. And it was so powerful. Yeah, sometimes if you talk to a random stranger next to you, people kind of shy away. They don't really want to have anything to do with you because it's, well, where I come from in Norway, it's not the done thing. You don't talk to strangers, right? It's considered very bad form. So that's why I go against my own culture a little bit. It's kind of cool. So I started talking to people. I was talking to the person next to me. And this man was very happy. Yeah, we had a nice conversation together. We're starting off with something obvious like, well, talking about the line or whatever. And it kind of opens up a new reality. It's like I wanted to be kind. I wanted to share something positive with a complete stranger simply because I had read about these near-death experiences of other people. So I would really recommend you to do something similar. Make these things real. Try to understand them in a deeper way. What does a simple thing like the idea of rebirth actually mean on the emotional level? And as you open up, as you start to see some of these stories, it is extraordinarily powerful. One of the stories you may want to look up is a story of a lady called Anita Morjani, who you may have heard about, very famous near-death experience. You can look her up on the internet. She's on YouTube. She's given talks about this. And she was basically dying of cancer. She was only hours away, it seems, from dying. And then she had a near-death experience. And she started to understand what was going on. It was just her attitude, her mentality that was crazy. Once she had seen that, she came back to life again. And within a few weeks, she was completely rid of cancer, even though she was at death's door only a few days before her. Another one of those extraordinary stories where your entire attitude just changes everything for you. So what I am trying to say is just that on this path of Buddhism, there are so many perceptions, so many ideas that we should try to develop. And some of the most basic ideas that have with right view in this world, ideas like rebirth, are incredibly rich ideas. The ideas that have really changed our entire outlook, our entire understanding of what the world is about. And if we understand them in the right way, they have a powerful impact on us. Will make the path much easier for us, will make us more kind, more caring, better people, and as a consequence will make meditation better, will increase our wisdom, and will make the whole path take off in a much better way than it has before. So that is just a very short talk for you today. There's only a few minutes left, but if you wish, we can take a few more questions of the last few minutes, if you like.
Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourselves or put them in the chat. Or if you wish to make a comment.
Hi, Chris. I have a question.
Oh, please go ahead.
Ajahn, I've lost you. Are you there?
Okay.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
I used to find sort of rebirth, obviously not as well versed in it as I could be, but I used to find it sort of calming, but of late I find it a bit terrifying. Think about, sometimes you read about, 40,000 rebirths or whatever. So sometimes I'd like to get over that terror, I guess, to explore it. So maybe that's a way, like reading about these near-death experiences,
I know what you mean. It can be quite scary, actually, the idea of rebirth, if you understand it correctly. It certainly can be problematic, but that is not necessarily bad. It may mean that you have a somewhat realistic idea as well. So the idea is just to remember that for good people, the future is bright. So if you live well, the future is going to be a good one. And that is really the main lesson to come out of this, is if you want to create something positive, whether in this life or in future lives, always living well is the right path. But what you will find is that many of these stories are actually very uplifting, because many of the stories are stories of people who have some very positive experience in the realm of rebirth or near-death experiences. So there are people who also have negative experience, but we learn from the positive ones. And if you learn the lesson from the positive ones, then I think it will become very, very powerful. But, down the track it's useful to remember that the whole purpose, ultimately, of the Buddhist path is actually to overcome rebirth, And there is a reason why that is the ultimate purpose, because ultimately it is problematic. So you try to take away those positive lessons, about living well, doing the right thing, and using that. And at the same time, at the back of your mind, you also remember that actually the whole thing is a little bit problematic, and ultimately down the track, let's see if we can overcome the whole gamut of rebirth and all that stuff. But I think that you will find that those books that you read about near-death experience, generally they are very positive. I read the book recently. The book I'm talking about now is a book called After. And After is written by one of the world's leading experts on near-death experiences, a fellow called Bruce Grayson. Bruce Grayson, Greyson. He is affiliated with the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies. And this was a very, to me, very kind of moving book and very very powerful. So if you have an opportunity, you can maybe buy it to yourself for Christmas or something, and you can have a nice Christmas reader, and then you're probably on the right track. So try to use it wisely, and I think you will benefit enormously if you do.
Thank you, Ajahn.
And Gita would like to unmute and ask you a question now.
Please.
Ajahn?
Please. Hello, Gita.
Yes, you're on.
I can hear you.
Yes, you are.
I can't hear you anymore. Now you are back. You are unmuted again. No, sorry, you are muted. Yeah, so you have to unmute yourself. Okay. There you are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bhante, when you were talking about this, it occurred to me that certainly some people could overcome their fear of death through this near-death experience, because it doesn't turn out to be this frightening sort of thing that they might have previously thought. So I can see that could be positive. But it occurs to me that just the contemplation of death alone should do this. That life becomes a precious opportunity because you know that death is real. Yeah. It's a reality. You don't have to have any kind of conception of rebirth or anything. So I was just thinking, contemplation of death is kind of the same thing in a way.
Yeah.
Of making whatever opportunities in life are there to be taken in for a wholesome way.
Yeah.
Without any, because some people find the whole notion of rebirth is like there's a big jump here, a leap of faith. You want to go there, but there's no leap of faith when you see someone close to you dying.
Yeah. True. I agree with you. I think the idea of Maranasati or Maranasanya, which is the recollection of death or the death perception, is actually very important. And I think everyone, the Buddha says that specifically in the sutras, everyone should do that particular recollection. Yeah, he says lay people or monastics and monks and nuns, men and women, everyone should do this. So I think it is very powerful, and I think it is basic to the path, and so it's something we should all try. And I agree with you. If you kind of are faced with death, what are you going to do? If you're going to die, in an hour, are you going to go out and fight with someone or pick an argument with somebody, or what are you going to do on your deathbed? You just want to be peaceful. You're not going to argue with anyone on your deathbed. So I agree, and I think it is absolutely true. But what I would say, however, is that there are many perceptions or many kinds or aspects to the idea of right view that the Buddha teaches. And I think sometimes we need a number of tools to be able to really deal with this spiritual path in the right way. And we should use different tools at different times. And so, for example, there will be times when the death contemplation is very powerful and very useful to you. After a while, if you use it too much, it will lose some of its sharpness. it may not have the same kind of impact anymore. It may be good to try something else. Try understanding the idea of rebirth. Try contemplating the idea of suffering. Try to contemplate the idea of the downside in the sensory world. Whatever it is, we swap around a little bit. Use different things because they are all very useful and they're all pointing in the same direction. And to me, the idea of rebirth is actually very powerful. And I recognize that there are people who don't find it hard to believe in rebirth. But because it is such a fundamental aspect of right view on the Buddhist path, it is something that I think we should all give its due attention to this, precisely because the Buddha says it is a fundamental aspect of right view. And for me, some of these things have actually been very, very useful to contemplate and have been very helpful for me to live better, and do the right thing. So I'm just kind of passing on, in a sense, my own experience with this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, Ajahn, I think we might have reached the time for saying good night.
Yeah.
But before you go, Ajahn, would you be happy to offer us all a blessing?
Sure. Yeah. What kind of blessing do you want? Which blessing do you want? Do you want the anti-war blessing, or the anti-COVID blessing, or the anti? Okay. Well,
I think the anti-bad dress. Cover all contingencies.
Continue with it. Okay. We'll do the blessing that is the best one. The best one is the one where we share the merit. Yeah, because that's where we kind of get even more blessings out of the blessing. So let's just share the merits of the occasion here. So here we go. Edang men yate nang hotu sukita hontu nyata yo. Edang men yate nang hotu sukita hontu nyata yo. Edang men yate nang hotu sukita hontu nyata yo.